should, at this moment, just look at your neighbor, turn to your neighbor, smile at your neighbor. Don't look at me in a different neighborhood. Look at your neighbor, smile at your neighbor. In trouble. I guarantee. Your neighbor, just repeat after me and say, neighbor. Neighbor. We are all called to make a way. It is the great writer Olive Schreiner from South Africa that Howard Thurman so often loved to quote. She tells an amazing story where she says, have you seen the locusts? How they cross the stream. First, one comes down to the water's edge. And then the current takes away that locust, and the locust is heard no more. Have you seen the locust? But eventually another locust comes down and attempts to cross the stream, and then another, and bodies upon each other eventually build a bridge to the other side. They make their track to the water's edge. But it is Olive Schreiner who says that what of those who made the way to the river and were taken away by the current and heard from no more? Their name will not be written in lights. They will not have plaques upon the wall. There will be no days to celebrate them. But the reason that they were able to make it to the other side of the river is that there was one who was willing to make a way for someone else. Olive Schreiner was right that there are those who have made a track to the water's edge. An edge of names that we will never even be able to lift up in this place. That made it possible because of their sacrifices and because of their courage. We have such a tendency to lift up the celebrated people in history, and we should. And this day, we celebrate the legacy and the life of Dr. King and all that he has done. Sometimes we have a truncated memory of who Dr. King was and what his legacy was about. We leave him sometimes in this sphere of I have a dream, and not realizing that he put his life on the line, not just to transform America in terms of its racial situation, but to also recognize the economic and the militarism that was on the rise in America. But there would be no Dr. King, because we love to lift up Dr. King, but there are other people who made a way so that Dr. King would be able to speak prophetically in America. One such person is one of my favorite people of history, but many people have never heard of him or engaged. Is a person by the name of Vernon Johns. Dr. Vernon Johns was the predecessor of Dr. King at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He could speak fluent Greek, he could speak fluent Hebrew, but yet came from those schools in the South where you could only go to school, Deacon Reed, about 4 months out of the year. Because he had to spend the rest of the months making sure that the harvest came in. And when he had graduated from school, he decided that he was going to go to Oberlin College. And Oberlin had said that they could not take him because he did not come from an accredited school. But he arrived on the campus simultaneously as the letter for his denial was going back to his house. Spoke to the dean at Oberlin, and the dean at Oberlin said, "We can't take you, you don't have credits." And Vernon Johns, with such wit, said back to him, "Do you want people with brains or do you want credits?" You understand that in order for you to be a part of this school, you must be able to read Greek fluently. And Vernon Johns looked back and said, "Is that a Greek book behind you?" He took the Greek book and he read it fluently. He said, "Yeah, that's good, but you must also be able to read Hebrew." He said, "Is that not a Torah behind you?" He took the Torah and he read it fluently, and he was accepted into Oberlin, and he graduated at the top of his class and was eventually called to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. This young man who was called at that time was rabble-rousing. This is the 1940s and the late 30s, and he would always list his sermons on the marquee. He would have peculiar titles of his sermons. His sermons, some of them would have titles like this: "Is Heaven Segregated?" The title might be something like this: "Is it legal to lynch Negroes in Alabama?" Can you imagine a man preaching a sermon that literally they had to put the sheriff's department on call, because they had to go by and see what Vernon Johns was going to preach every week. Now that's powerful preaching. If you cause the sheriff's department to circle the church every Saturday night, figure out what you're going to preach on Sunday morning. Vernon Johns, with his power, he would always love to, Sister Mystique, love to upset the bourgeois congregation of Dexter Avenue. Because they believed in being prim and proper, and not causing any problems in Montgomery, Alabama. And so on one Sunday, he said that since we are people of African descent, I think that we should sing spirituals. He said, we don't do that here. That's field music. He said, how do you think you got here to Alabama? You came out the field. He would demand that they sing things that were out of their tradition. He was such a powerful and incredible person that he would stand, he would have his Sunday robe on, but under his robe would always be overalls. After he gave the benediction, he would go out on the front steps and he would begin to sell tomatoes and watermelons. And people were upset. He said, it just looks bad for the preacher to sell watermelons on the front stoop. He said, I raised these watermelons. I'm going to sell these watermelons. We will be producers and not consumers. Said to them, he said in one quote I say that he says to his bourgeois congregation, he said, if you want to see an act of perpetual motion, ask a Negro to park his Cadillac on land he owns. It's always focusing on the idea that you must have self-determination and that you must claim your dignity within the economy of God. But the deacons didn't like this. Deacon Butler, they didn't like Johns at all. He was always causing too much trouble. As a matter of fact, Johns was interesting. He was liberal on one hand, and then he was a fundamentalist on another. One person asked him one day, we need you to perform a funeral for one of the deacon's sons. John said, was he a member? He said, no. He said, well, I'm not performing the funeral. He said, no, you don't understand. This is a prominent person who gives a lot of money. He said, did he die in a bar fight? He said, yeah, but you don't understand. He's a prominent person in the church. We need the money. He said, all right, I'll do the funeral. This is Vernon Johns saying. This is Vernon Johns talking. He comes in. They have done all of the things in